Hi, I'm Bill Vales with another edition of Your Backyard. And for this edition of Your Backyard, we're going to be going down into Tophet's Chasm. So come on along. It's going to be a very interesting walk. Well, we're starting down into the chasm, but I've had to interrupt going down into the chasm because we found this great deposit of Tadmuck Brook schist. And the thing that I wanted to point out about this Tadmuck Brook schist is you'll notice that it's on end. It's effectively on end. And that refers to the dip angle of the rock. That this rock has been under heavy compressional forces. It was actually laid down flat and it's been pushed up and it's on end. It's about at a 90-degree dip. And you can get a good sense here of the Tadmuck Brook schist of how platy it is and how relatively incompetent it is. And you'll see, as we get down into the chasm, you'll see massive pieces of this schist throughout. Okay. Well, we're near the bottom of the chasm, not quite there yet, but I wanted to make note of these massive pieces of Tadmuck Brook schist that are behind me. And you'll notice that the dip angle or the orientation of this schist is near vertical. So it's been compressed and upended such that it's at a 90-degree angle. And these pieces of Tadmuck Brook schist are bigger than houses. They're really quite large, and it's quite impressive. So let's get on down into the chasm. Well, we've made it, finally. And I'm always impressed with the massive pieces of Tadmuck Brook schist that are around me. Equally amazing to me is how green things are in New England in the springtime. We're looking at all the green ferns. A lot of these ferns are evergreen ferns, and they survive through the winter. But there is a lot of greening out of here. I can see new growth on the hemlock trees. Hemlock likes a wet environment, and certainly Tophet's Chasm is wet. It's wetter than I've ever seen it. I traversed this chasm several times over the last year and a half, completely dry. One area of note I'd like to mention that's significant is that if you go through the chasm, you will notice there is an absence of glacial till in the sense of larger rocks and cobbles. And the thinking behind that is that the water came down here so fast that all the glacial debris was virtually moved out. Okay, moved out. We're at the head wall here, and it was moved out to the exit point of the chasm. I've looked throughout here and find very few boulders. I know from reading documents that sounding rods were used to determine the depth of the muck in the swamp. And I believe the sounding rods went down about 20-25 feet, and there was no bedrock found to that depth. So this area down here is a swamp. It has filled in over the years. We're probably at a depth of 90 feet. Today, to me, it looks like 100 feet, but I could be like a fisherman making things bigger, but it does look Quite impressive. So let's continue our way around the chasm. Okay, we're very near the head wall here, and this collection of rocks behind me, I've heard a couple different stories of where these rocks came from. One is that it's a glacial till that was moved down on the rim under the force of gravity. Another story that I heard was that it could have been farmers clearing fields up above and dropping stones over the side to clear the fields. It's unclear to me, but both of those ideas have been documented. But this is about the only area where I've seen till coming down the sides. Well, what's striking here to me is just how quiet it is. It's very quiet. I hear bird sound. I hear some peepers, believe it or not, even though it's during the day, but I also hear the bubbling of water. And I suspect that that water is coming from the vernal pools, that it's originating in the vernal pools that we saw on the north side and working its way down the north rim, and we're hearing that down here. The amount of water in the chasm this year is really striking. What we're not seeing, and perhaps we're a couple weeks too early, is the beautiful marigold. It's called Marsh Marigold. Beautiful yellow flowers that bloom in here. And in a couple weeks they'll be here. So I'd encourage you to come down and take a look at them. I'm always struck by the deposits of schist that are on this south wall up here. Wow, take a look at that head wall that's on the west side of the chasm. Really very impressive. And you can really see the outline there of the meltwater channel. So think about it, all the water racing down here as the glacier is melting, moving everything out from this central point where all the water was converging. And that would have moved all the glacial till out. Okay, I've climbed up a little bit from the bottom of the chasm up the south wall a little bit to give you this sense of scale of just how big these deposits of Tadmuck Brook schist are. As you can see, they're absolutely massive, and they're all on end, meaning that dip angle of where they enter the earth is fairly vertical, near 90 degrees. Now, one might ask, why did the water from the glacier melting tend to select this point to come through? Well, there's a couple things working here. One, we're near a fault line, the Clinton-Newberry fault. So fault lines don't run perfectly straight. There's little jigs and jags out from the fault lines. So this represented an area of weakness in the rock that made large torrents of water tend to gravitate to this area because it was an area of least resistance. Also, another factor working is that while the glacier was melting and filling up the area that we think of in the Nashua River Valley as Wachusett Reservoir, as the water was working its way down, it's always seeking a lower point to empty out. And Tophet's chasm turned out to be a lower point than the point at Wachusett, what we think of nowadays as at Wachusett Reservoir. So the combination of this having incompetent rock, the Tadmuck Brook schist, which you could see broke easily, being by a fault line, and also being lower than where the water was accumulating prior to that, made this just a natural place for the water to drain out. And the results of it are pretty spectacular. Well, we're about a quarter of the way through the bottom of the chasm, and we're about in the center of it now. And what caught my eye here was some beautiful plants that are coming through. And we've debated a little bit what this is. We went from pitcher plants to jack in the pulpit, but we've settled on skunk cabbage. And it actually looks quite interesting, quite attractive. It certainly has a way to go in its growth. Okay, my feet are getting a little wet, but you see here, these are the Marsh Marigolds that I spoke about. And these are probably a week or so away from blooming. Okay, there'll be a beautiful yellow flower, absolutely beautiful. And I can see them all through here. There's some more skunk cabbage all through here. Really a beautiful setting. And you're going to see tadpoles in here, various types of warblers, songbirds. I'm hearing a fair amount of bird song in here. There's some blue jays. I hear the tufted titmouse again. Okay, you try to do this without getting too wet. Well, it's absolutely beautiful in here. Quiet, very green. I think I'm just going to sit down for a minute. One thing I'd like to make note of here, we're closest to the south wall of the canyon, of the chasm. And on the south wall, as we're inside the chasm, this would be an area that's shaded, while the north wall would tend to get more sun. And sure enough, what we see here is quite a difference in the vegetation. We see in the more shaded area, we see a lot of hemlock and species that would thrive more in a wet environment. But if we look at the vegetation, the trees on near the north wall of the chasm, we see a lot of beech and oak, and frankly, trees and vegetation that does much better with sunlight. So in an area this size, because of how much sun comes down here, you really do get different types of ecosystems that develop within here. There's quite a profusion of mushrooms throughout here, different types of mushrooms. I saw on the ground as I was walking along this turkey tail mushroom, and these are all along on deadwood. There's different types of species of mushrooms, and they're very interesting to look at. But I'm seeing princess pine starting up, various types of mosses, and this is just a delightful place to sit down here. I see some people walking way above me on the rim up there. Real nice place. Well, we're near the end of the Tophet Chasm, the Chasm Trail. We're between two of the meltwater channels, and right on the corner of one of the meltwater channels is this interesting formation in a piece of Tadmuck Brook schist. And what we see here, if you can make out, the rock has folded here, and this is the point that it folded at. And this is called a recumbent fold. This is where the rock, when it was in a very plastic state, very malleable, meaning it was deep, it was under heat, it was under pressure, but it had a malleable consistency to it. It could fold. And that's exactly what happened here. This rock folded. And this is called a recumbent fold. And I think that's pretty neat. Well, I have to say this is the most fortuitous moment for me because we were just finishing up our filming on Oak Hill, and who walks in but Bill Brown. Bill, good to see you.
How you doing?
Bill's one of the land stewards of Oak Hill, and you do a marvelous job.
Thanks. A lot of work goes into it. We cut out like 25 trees every year, you know, with chainsaw.
Yeah.
Biggest one last year was a 14-inch, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. There's an 18-inch pine down right now.
I think we saw that.
Yeah.
I think we saw that.
Yeah.
I'm always struck by the amount that I walk through here, just how clean the trails are, how clear they are. They're free of litter.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we do, you know, clean up and brush it, and the people are pretty good.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, yeah. I remember once I had a graffiti incident that I encountered on a rock, some big graffiti on there, and 2 days later, it was gone.
Graffiti remover.
Yeah, graffiti remover.
Yeah.
Great. So you're on your walk today through here?
Just a little walk.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, little walk. Maybe you can help us with something. We were down, we walked through the chasm, okay? And we could see the Marsh Marigold just just starting to come.
Yeah.
And we got into a little debate over Jack in the Pulpit, Skunk Cabbage, or pitcher plant.
You probably saw Skunk Cabbage coming up.
Okay.
It's got like a thing like this. Yeah, that's Skunk Cabbage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
that generates its own heat, so that's one of the first things that can even poke through the ice. You know, and, you know, even if there was ice, there's no ice there now. But
I see. How does it generate its own heat?
Chemical reaction.
I see. Interesting.
I haven't seen Jack in the Pulpit down in the chasm. I have seen it on the other side, and you know, off the Sanderson Esker.
Interesting. Okay. Well, my wife was right on that, so I need to give her credit on that. She's an old river rat from the Assabet River in Stowe, so it's great. Well, it's great to see you, Bill.
Yeah, good seeing you.
This was really fortuitous, and hope to see you throughout the summer, spring and summer.
Sure.
Okay. Good to see you, Bill. Thanks. Well, we're at the end of the trip through Tophet's Chasm, and we've stopped here, actually where we began, but the reason I didn't want to talk about this at the beginning was I think it'll make more sense at the end here. And where Tophet's Chasm is really a story about a lot of water moving rapidly, water being released from the glacier. I've been looking around the whole Oak Hill area and Greater Littleton for signs of a lot of water movement. And what I've found are areas such as this in Tadmuck Brook Schist. This is just at the entrance to Oak Hill. And you see a lot of smoothing of rock that would be indicative of some agent working to smooth that rock. And that agent could certainly be rushing water over many, many years, water carrying various types of sand and grit and outwash. And as I've gone through Tophet's Chasm and Littleton and the greater watersheds area of the Nashua River, Stony Brook River, I find various deposits that are really indicative of a lot of water being moved. And this is one area. But another area is over here, and it's even better. This area, for me, is one of the more exciting areas that I've found at Tophet's Chasm that shows to me the power of moving water. This, to me, looks like a glacial pothole that was developed from, and the way a pothole develops is torrents of water would be moving around, and in the water would be stones, and and it's moving around, carving out an area such as this. And you can see that this Tadmuck Brook schist has really been smooth. You run your hand over it, it's quite smooth. We see, Carol and I see a lot of glacial potholes in the White Mountain area of New Hampshire. And there are several of them in Massachusetts. Most notably at Shelburne Falls, I believe, is an area known for glacial potholes. This is an area that I've been seeking out opinions of other people. I hope to bring some geologists up here to look at this, but this sure looks to me like a glacial pothole. And you know, we know water has played a huge role in the history of Tophet's Chasm. It's a significant part of the Nashua River watershed, and with tremendous volumes of water being pushed through from a melting glacier, it's easy to think that glacial potholes have been formed. And as I walk through Oak Hill and Tophet, I see lots of signs of smoothing through hydraulic action of water. So, well, that's it for our tour through Tophet's Chasm. I really enjoyed the time with the film crew today and with Mark and Carol. And I'd encourage you all to get on your hiking shoes, come over to Oak Hill, walk through it. It's a jewel in the Littleton Conservation Trust portfolio. It takes little effort to go through it. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this.